His companion dumped the open leaves onto his lap as he sat back, closed his eyes, anticipating. Smirking, the author uptook the leaves, breathed, and began reading. What's a 10-page poem to a splash of paint, a muscle moved, a light directed? 6 strings neglected, yet the voice it comes out freer, clearer, frets beneath an E string, fingers held, replaced. 1 note on the guitar as a mind translated. There's a rhythm on the blank page. I just fill it as best I can. As best I can, I fill the blank page with a rhythm. 'Twasn't words in the ephemeral flame light of our infant night time. 'Twas utterance astride percussive, primal movement. From Floating on the Avon by the Floodplains of the Nile. Hello, welcome to Ink Blue Thoughts, a new poetry podcast, at least I think it's a podcast, and general self-indulgent endeavour by me. My name is William Altoft, and I'm a poet and writer from the UK. Over the last 10 years, I've written over 400 poems and a number of longer works, some poetry, some prose, some poetrose, coming in the form of longer poetry, short stories, novellas. I'm currently trying to turn one series of my poems into a TV show, and another series of my poems into a play, along with actually continuing and finishing both of those currently only part-done poem series. This podcast is the next step in my DIY self-publishing journey and my unending, very, very marginally successful attempts to get my writing in front of as many eyes, and now into as many ears, as possible. After spending a number of years sharing my writing only online via WordPress and eventually Instagram, I began to experiment with sharing it offline. I started this with my first novella, The Floating Harbour. I serialized it by taking each chapter, giving them title pages with photos of the relevant area of the Bristol harbourside and Old City, which is where the story takes place, and then left them, printed and stapled, in different cafes throughout Bristol. I also created some little poetry collections. Again, these were simply printed, folded, stapled. I left them in the same kinds of places, some to stay as cafe or library copies, others in piles to be taken freely. I've also used a printing company called Mix'em, that's not a sponsorship, but hey, one day, to produce some slightly less low-budget collections, complete with artwork by family, which I have attempted to sell, both via sitting with the booklets and a card reader, and via leaving them with a price list and a QR code as honesty box for payment. I have made leaflets that act as teasers or crappy little posters for longer works, with the title and a cover picture on one side, an extract, short blurb, and QR code on the other side. The QR code taking people to a free, downloadable PDF of whatever it is the leaflet was for. And I hope to eventually set up an online shop, also called Ink Blue Thoughts, where I can sell those less low-budget collections, as well as handwritten poetry books. I want to add more poetry collections as time goes by, and eventually my long stuff too. As far as traditional publishing goes, I've done a bit of increasingly begrudging grovelling to the gatekeepers here and there, but aside from a tanka published in the journal Atlas Poetica, and a poem published in the collection Bring Me Gold, 50 Poems for Palestine, I've had no other luck going the traditional route. The extract you heard me reading at the beginning of this episode was from Floating on the Avon by the Floodplains of the Nile, my second novella, the spiritual sequel to The Floating Harbour. I was hoping to intrigue you with an extract of my writing in an otherwise prose and poemless episode. Hopefully it worked. The poems will begin from the next episode. I'll be going through each of my poems chronologically, one per episode. When I reach a longer work, such as The Floating Harbour or its follow-up, I will stop the main series of poems to serialize the longer work over a week or few. Essentially, they'll be like mini-series asides to the main series. Now, because the main series episodes are going to be readings of my poems, they will vary in length, sometimes massively. I mean, there are going to be episodes where the intro music and me reading the title will be longer than the poem itself. There are also some cases of visual poems, or poems where the experience of them is entirely in the way they are spelled and formatted, and reading them out loud would lose the point. Don't forget, writing is a visual art, and a poem created to be read, to be brought to life by the mind's eye voice of a person as they experience the poem on the page or screen through the active engagement of their eyes, cannot be heard. I will still include these, and still give the title and publish date as normal, but then discuss the poem instead of reading it. At one point a few years ago, I was self-learning Japanese, and as part of this, I wrote some poems in the language. Having long since abandoned that goal, I've gotten myself into the rather strange situation of no longer being able to read a bunch of the poems that I myself have written. So when I come to those, I'm going to have to remind myself of what I was writing and how to pronounce it. I'm now self-learning Egyptian Arabic, so we'll see where we end up with that. I also want to eventually get around to making different kinds of episodes. For example, an episode of thoughts on copyright, Creative Commons and licensing. An episode on particular types or forms of poetry and my coming to know them and experiment with them. An episode on what I've done through teaching writing to children. Maybe it could even be interviews. It would be super interesting to talk with others about poetry and writing. If this is ever a platform of any size whatsoever, I'd absolutely love to share it with others. Otherwise, it's just going to be me reading out stuff by me until there's no stuff by me left for me to read. But how could a language die? She ceased her caressing of the symbols into sand, proud yet pained at how they lay ephemeral. The woman knelt amongst the linen that she moved and mended, tilted o'er her head, her tan eyes keeping handward. Well, shoe may sweep across the land and will away the grooves you practice in vulnerable ground. But even in the rock and on the painted walls, inscriptions carved, reliefs rendered in all their colour, there hides the threat of oblivion. What you've written rests behind a seal. But you've told me what they mean. She brushes light 3 fingers through her formed, imperfect hand. And if you forgot, and I were gone? Balanced on her haunches, her heels above the ground, her hands hung limp between her bended knees, the girl-child kept her verdant eyes locked, thoughtful on her writing, comprehending their incomprehensibility. In the pregnant pause gestates an understanding. There is no way to protect what I have created. The woman, nor that brought to life by others. The event horizons of their irides, melanined in Magellanic clouds, fall infinitely on into their soul-dark apertures. From Floating on the Avon by the Floodplains of the Nile. Going forward, my plan is to release 4 episodes per week, on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. On some of those days, I will release 2 episodes, usually when one or both poems are very short. I'm sure that as I go along, the way I do things will change, adapt, revert, evolve. I'm really excited to start sharing my writing in yet another new and yet deeply different way, through another medium. I might be talking to the void, but I don't mind speaking my writing to the void. If you would like to read my writing, written will forever be its truest form, and reading it for oneself is something that I hope anyone who discovers my work through this podcast will experience. You can find all of it on my WordPress, williamaltoft.blog. I will put any and all links in the episode descriptions, including linking directly to the particular poem covered by each episode. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Can't quite believe I just said that sentence. And you can follow it on Instagram at inkbluethoughts, and you can follow me personally there at William Altoft. I also have a Patreon under the name inkbluethoughts. I've created some tiers that people can choose from as different levels of support, and there is a PayPal too if anyone would like to throw coins into the upturned hat. However, as ever with my writing, it will all be freely available for always. Giving my writing but the briefest chance before your eyes or ears is all I would request. Anything more than that is beyond expectation and wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for listening. On to the next episode and my first poem. See you next time. you.